Good evening, everyone. I'm going to wait just a second to get started as folks are getting connected. We've got, folks trickling in from the waiting room. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. My name is Aaron Megquier, and I'm the Executive Director of Friends of Baxter State Park, and I am incredibly excited to be here talking to you tonight about one of my favorite things, which is climbing Katahdin. So before we get started, I want to do a special thank you to our members who are in attendance tonight. We're really glad you're here. Thank you so much for joining us. And it's really because of our members that programs like this are possible. Our members support our work financially, volunteer their time, give so generously of their expertise and passion for the park, and we really wouldn't be here without them. So if you're a member watching tonight, please give yourself a giant pat on the back and a huge thank you from all of us for making our work on behalf of the park possible. And if you are not yet a member, we would love to welcome you. We have several of our staff who are going to be participating in the meeting chat tonight. Any of them can answer your questions once we get started. I'm happy to answer your questions later when we get to Q&A time if you have any questions about Friends membership or how to get involved. But we're a very welcoming bunch, and we would love to welcome you to our community of support for the park. Before we get started, obviously we are on Zoom and in a webinar format tonight. For many of us, webinars are old hat by this point after the COVID years in the last few years. Many of you have probably spent more hours than you care to count on Zoom. But if that is not the case, and this is feeling a little unfamiliar for you, let me run through the technology that we have available to us tonight before we get started. So first of all, webinar format means that you can see and hear me, but no one else in the meeting, including me, can see or hear you. So you do not need to worry about the barking dog or the background noise. It's not going to disrupt anyone else in the webinar tonight. So there are also some special tools that we have in webinar format that you can use to interact and to ask questions and share your opinion. And one of those is called Q&A. And if you have updated your Zoom software in the last couple years, you will see Q&A at the bottom of your screen as an option that you can click on. And if you click on that, you can type in your question and it will be held there until it's Q&A time. So you can do that at any point during the webinar tonight. No need to wait for the end. We also turned on the ability for you, if somebody already asked your question, but it's something that you would really like to know the answer to, you can do a little upvote or thumbs up for their question and indicate that you're also interested in that. And so if we see questions with a lot of different people who are wondering about them, we'll make sure to prioritize those and answer them. In addition to the Q&A, we have the meeting chat. And if you are having any tech issues whatsoever, can't see, can't hear properly, your window's the wrong size, anything that we can help you with, please reach out in the chat. And my coworkers, Jam, Cass, and Rachel would be more than happy to help you. So let's jump in. If any of you have any questions so far about any of the tech stuff, please don't be shy and hop right in and ask those now. Otherwise, I think it's time to get started. So Katahdin, the reason we are all here, and especially on these rainy spring days here in Maine, it's something that I know is on all of our minds as we're gearing up for hiking season. I know it's on mine, and clearly because you're here tonight, it's on yours too. It's absolutely incredible mountain, and for any of you who have been there before, you know, glaciated granite, massive areas of above tree line alpine terrain, utterly spectacular, wild, remote, no roads, no railroad, cog railroad to the top, no crowds most of the time, an incredibly wild, rewarding place to hike. And so what we're looking for tonight is to share some information with you about how to plan a successful Katahdin hike. Happy, safe, fun, rewarding hike of Katahdin for you and your hiking buddies, your loved ones. So before we get started, I would really love to hear from each of you in attendance briefly about whether you've climbed Katahdin before. Curious to hear about your experience, so I can kind of tailor my comments to to who's in attendance. So I'm going to launch a poll in a second. It's going to pop up on your screen, and it's going to have some choices about, and the question is, have you ever climbed Katahdin before? So I'm going to launch that now, and I would love to hear your answers to that. That will really help me. All right, there we go. That will really help me tailor my comments and my information to what you hopefully need to hear. So that should be up on your screen. I'm going to leave that up for 20 seconds or so. So jump right in if you have a response, and then I'll read them out loud and share, so you can know who else is in the audience too tonight. All right, I'll give it 5 more seconds or so. All right, thanks everyone who's weighed in. And several of you weighing in the chat. Appreciate that too. That's totally fine. All right, I'm gonna call that good. So I'm gonna show the results on your screen so you can see as well. The choices were no, but maybe someday. That was 24 of you, so about 20, just over 20% of the audience. No, but I'm planning to go soon. That was 35 of you, just over a third of the audience. Yes, once, about 16%, a few times 10%, and 5 or more times 18%. So quite a few folks in attendance who haven't climbed before. I am especially glad that you are here, and I really, it's a place that I love to share information about and talk about, and I'm excited to answer your questions and help you feel more prepared for your visit tonight. And if you're one of the folks who has climbed before, whether that's once, a few times, or more than 5 times, I'm going to try to provide some information that hopefully will be valuable for you too, ways that you can increase the level of safety on the mountain for yourself and your loved ones during your next hike. So I'm going to stop sharing that poll on screen now. Thank you so much for weighing in. And let's jump in. So I'm going to talk a lot about preparation today, and what to do to prepare for your next Katahdin hike, whether you have a date in mind and a trip planned for this summer, or whether you're hoping to get there sometime in the future. I'm going to try to give you some concrete information so that you can plan a good and rewarding trip for yourself. So hiking Katahdin does not start when you're standing there at the trailhead, ready to set off up the mountain. It actually starts when you're sitting around the kitchen table or wherever the hub of activity is in your house. A hike of Katahdin really starts well before you ever set foot in the park or get near the trailhead. So what we're going to cover today are 6 primary topics around how you can prepare. The first is logistics. We're also going to talk about gear, route selection, weather, risk management, and then finally, what happens if something goes wrong. So those are the 6 topics that we're going to work our way through over the course of this presentation, starting with logistics. And logistics is pretty much everything that happens to get you, your hiking buddies, and your gear to a Katahdin trailhead before 7 in the morning on a day when the weather is good enough for you to climb. Those are the logistics we're talking about. There are a lot of steps that have to go smoothly for that to happen and for you to be there at the trailhead ready to start your hike. So I'd like to talk about that for a few minutes. And if you have questions, I know this is an area of the presentation where folks are likely to have questions. Please do ask them in the Q&A. I'll do my best to answer them. But there is a lot of really helpful information out there as well on the park website and other places that I can direct you to if you do end up with more detailed questions. But I'm going to do a fairly high-level overview of how to plan the logistics of your Katahdin hike. So there are really 3 options. Big picture options for how you can plan a hike. One is to camp in the park the night before you're going to climb. I want to talk about that first because it's, I think, probably the best way to do it in most circumstances. The other options that we're going to talk about are getting a Katahdin Trailhead Pass, which is a parking reservation for the day you're planning to climb the mountain. And the third option, and unfortunately the option that many people resort to, is just winging it and showing up at the gate and hoping you get in. I prefer the options in the order I read them to you: camping, Katahdin Trailhead Pass, winging it in that order. But I fully recognize, especially for those of us who live closer to the park, that camping just sometimes isn't a realistic option, and we just need to go in for the day. So I'm going to talk you through that option as well. So first of all, camping. Anywhere in the park is a possibility the night before a Katahdin hike, but if you're less familiar with the park, just be aware that many campgrounds in the park are several hour drive away from Katahdin Trailhead. South Branch Pond, almost 2 hours away from the nearest Katahdin Trailhead. So if you're going to camp, really the best place to stay is either at one of the 3 Katahdin trailheads. That's A-Ball, Katahdin Stream, or Roaring Brook. Those are the 3. And other spots that are close by, not really camping, but staying in the cabins at Kidney and Dacey Pond, also really close to the trailheads on the west side of the park, and great options the night before a Katahdin hike. There are some real advantages to staying in the park the night before. If you camp in the park the night before, you do not need to get a Katahdin Trailhead Pass parking reservation. Okay? You can stay at your campsite the night before. You do not need to go through that extra step of reserving parking. You can get up as early as you want. Gate doesn't open till 6 to let in day use visitors, but if you're camping, you can get up at 4:30, 5, whatever time you want, and get on the trail early. And there are some real advantages to that, which we're going to talk about a little bit later. So, and especially if you're going to be hiking with young children, it's a really, really long day for kids to come into especially young kids, to come into the park and do a day hike of Katahdin. I really think it's a way better plan to camp in the park the night before if you have young kids. And my favorite way to do that is actually to hike into Chimney Pond, to break the Katahdin hike up into a few days. Hike to Chimney Pond, sleep, get up, climb the mountain, come back down, sleep again, and then hike out on the 3rd day. It's a chunk of time, but if you're trying to introduce, 6, 7, 8-year-old, 9-year-old, 10-year-old, young kids to the park, in my experience, that is a great way to do it, and to stay in the park right up at Chimney Pond. Tough to get reservations, but well worth it if you can. Great way to introduce kids to Katahdin. So camping is the first option, and I'm going to stop right there. There's a lot more detail we could cover. If you have more detailed questions, please do ask in the chat. But camping the night before a Katahdin hike is an outstanding way to set yourself up for a great hike. Second way is a Katahdin Trailhead Pass, a KTP. You can reserve those online on the park website starting on April 1st for the entire season. And that is new. In prior years, they were on a rolling system of availability. Maine residents months ahead of time, out-of-state residents 2 weeks ahead of time. Now that is just April 1st for everyone. You can go in, see availability at all the different Katahdin trailheads, and make a reservation on your preferred day to climb. Those cost $10. With a Katahdin Trailhead Pass, you do have to be to the gate by 7 a.m. or your pass is void and they'll give your parking spot to someone else. So that means you have to go through the gate between when it opens at 6 and that 7 o'clock cutoff, and be headed into the park toward your trailhead by, and having gone through the gate by 7. So the cost is small, $10 for the certainty of knowing that you have a reserved spot. It is well worth it. The park has done an amazing job of tooling this system and reworking it last year to be more user-friendly and more clear and easy to understand for folks. A Katahdin Trailhead Pass looks like this. It's just a single page that you can print out and take with you. There's a little QR code on there, which the park now put its logo in the middle of. 10 essentials here on one side. And over here is your vehicle information and your information, contact information. These are non-transferable, okay? Non-transferable, and they also are specific to the vehicle, right? So you need to put in your plate number and come in that vehicle when you come into the park to use your Katahdin Trailhead Pass. If you have more specific questions about that, we can circle back to those later. So first option, camping. Second option, KTP. Third option, winging it. The frequent choice of so many people. And if you have ever showed up to the gate before on a summer weekend, you will see a line of cars stretching for sometimes a couple tenths of a mile back from the gate of folks who are really hoping and have their fingers crossed that they will get a spot to climb Katahdin. Very valid strategy. It has worked for many people before, but it is not on summer weekends, Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays in the summer, even into the fall. You are very likely to be disappointed if you go that route. On a rainy Tuesday in June, probably would work fine. Still, in my mind, it's worth the $10 to have a guaranteed spot. But if you are going to wing it, the line starts forming at the gate sometimes the night before. There's always people sleeping in their cars and trying things like that to get in the front of the line. Get there early, get in line, and what will happen is that park staff will have you move off to the side into what's called lane 1 and sit there until 7 when, for most people anyway, until all the reservation KTP folks have come through, and then if there are available spots left, you can head into the park then. Not ideal on a couple fronts. The uncertainty. Also, you wouldn't be leaving the gate until 7, getting to Roaring Brook or Abel or Katahdin Stream by 7:30, 7:45, on the trail by 8. That's a fairly late start by Katahdin standards, and especially in the fall, that leaves you with fairly minimal daylight to do your hike. So not a great option for several reasons, but as I said, a very frequent choice for many visitors to the park. If you have questions on logistics, I'm going to keep rolling on, but that was the first area that I wanted to touch on for planning. And if you have questions on logistics, please do record them in the Q&A, but we're going to move on next to gear. So gear really falls into two categories for a Katahdin hike. There's the gear that goes on your body, clothes and other equipment that you carry on your body, and then there's the stuff that goes in your pack. And we're going to be talking about both of those in a fair amount of detail because in my experience, gear is one of the areas where new Katahdin hikers and new hikers of big mountains everywhere often run into some trouble is knowing what to take, how much to take, what to pack based on the conditions you're seeing. So we're going to talk through all of that. But we're going to start with what to wear, the first category of gear, what to wear on your body for a Katahdin hike. Clearly, there is a huge range of conditions during the summer season. And by summer season, I'm really talking about mid-May, when the park opens up in the spring for camping until mid-October. I'm not talking about winter today. That is an entirely different kettle of fish. We're not going to be covering that today. But what I'm really going to cover are those late spring, summer, into fall conditions that you're likely to see during the peak of the park season, summer season. So we're going to start with clothes. And we're going to start even more specifically with footwear. Really important place to start. So a couple different ways you can go on the footwear front. I have seen people climbing Katahdin in everything from almost knee-high combat boots to flip-flops. I would not recommend either of those extremes, but there is a vast variety of footwear terrain in the middle between those two things where you can find something that will work for you. So we're going to talk about three different options in terms of footwear. One is hiking boots. We're going to hiking shoes are another option for you. And then I do see a fair number of people hiking in running shoes, and I have done it before myself, and they do work with some caveats. So probably the best choice for the average Katahdin hiker is a good broken in pair of lightweight to midweight hiking boots. I really think that's the best choice for most people. They have more ankle support, more protection for banging your feet up on rocks. I have seen people hike in lighter shoes, brand new lighter shoes, and by the time they come down from the mountain, at the end of the day, they look like they're 10 years old and they're almost destroyed after a single day on the mountain. So there is some real benefit to having some more sturdy protective footwear. These are actually my winter hiking boots. They're a little beefier than what I would probably climb Katahdin in the summer, but a nice broken in, right size for your feet pair of boots. They do not need to be expensive and fancy. I've hiked in, cheap $50, $80 Timberlands. I've hiked in expensive boots, and you can, as long as they're broken in and are the right size for your feet, they can work for you. So top choice boots. I very frequently also hike in hiking shoes. I have done Katahdin many, many times in low top hiking shoes. Many of my friends hike, that's their preferred way to hike as well. Totally valid choice for climbing Katahdin. Unless you are someone who chronically rolls your ankles, has weak ankles, has foot problems, for whatever reason, if you need something tougher, definitely go with boots. The benefit to shoes, lighter, on really hot days, a little more breathable, you're a little less likely to get overheated and really sweaty on your feet, and still can be built really well and be really protective for your feet. So these are Obo's hiking shoes, Keen's, any of the brands out there of well-made hiking shoes can work. Gore-Tex is pretty good if you're dealing with puddles after a rain, but really not going to help you much if you're dealing with a full-on rainy day. It doesn't really matter what you're wearing. You're going to get wet in it one way or the other. But if you do have waterproof shoes and boots, that is definitely a plus. The final option I would outline for you is running shoes. There are many different types of running shoes on the market, anything from road shoes with almost no tread on the bottom to trail shoes with protective rock plate and really knobby, aggressive tread. Trail shoes are definitely better, but as long as they're relatively new, you can climb on a dry day in running shoes. I would strongly advise against it on a wet day or a cold day in spring or fall. Definitely not what you want to have on your feet then, but on a bluebird summer day, they're a decent choice. I will say, most of us think about climbing on rock when we're on Katahdin. You're not actually going to be on rock all the time. A lot of the time you're going to be on lichen, and that green map lichen that grows all over the Katahdin tableland, when it gets wet, is unbelievably slippery. And running shoes on that stuff are an absolute nightmare when it's wet. So I would only use these if you're planning, if you're a great weather day they're a pair of shoes that are, more like trail shoes and pretty tough and that you don't mind getting beaten up. My daughter hiked in a brand new pair of running shoes. And like I said before, by the time she came down the mountain, they looked like they were about 10 years old and just almost ripped to shreds. So probably a second tier choice. Do not attempt to climb Katahdin in flip-flops. I was passed once on the A-Ball Trail by a guy wearing a pair of flip-flops and a pair of jean shorts with a pack of cigarettes in the back pocket and nothing else. No socks, no shirt, no backpack, no water, no nothing. That is just about the worst possible choice you could make. I saw him coming down the mountain later. He survived. It was an 85-degree, zero wind, perfect July day, but those sorts of choices do not lead anywhere good. So avoid flip-flops. Even as a diehard, Chaco person, Tivas and Chacos, I absolutely would not climb Katahdin in Chacos. Your feet will be bloody and bruised by the end. Okay for hiking in lower terrain, but they do not belong on Katahdin at all. So avoid sandals at all costs. Avoid lightweight running shoes with no tread. Burly trail shoes, okay. Hiking shoes, hiking boots, good on your feet. Avoid really heavy. The person I talked about who I knew who hiked in heavy military combat boots, each of those boots must weigh 3 or 4 pounds. I'm sure he worked twice as hard to climb the mountain as anybody else in the group because he was carrying so much weight. So go for lightweight. All right, enough on footwear. Let's move on to clothes. So the basic goal for choosing clothes for a Katahdin hike is, and you've heard this a million times before in the outdoors, but layers. So you're going to make some choices at the beginning of the day about how you're going to start out on the hike. If it's a really cold morning, wet morning, you're probably going to start out with a fair amount of your layers already on your body. If it's a dry, warm, hot summer day where the temperature's already in the 70s at 6:30 a.m. and it's really going to be a hot one, you might start out in shorts and a t-shirt. And that's where we're going to start. I'm going to show you and walk you through all the clothes and gear here that I brought that I would actually wear on a Katahdin hike. So on a summer day, your base layer might be a wicking shirt, a synthetic wicking shirt. This one's from LL Bean, but I've got ones from Rennie's and all over the place that are just as good. So this is my favorite hiking shirt, a wicking synthetic shirt, and a lightweight pair of synthetic hiking shorts, right? Pair of socks, and that's what I would start out in on a hot summer day, is with those clothes on my body. And the rest of my layers, of which I have many, are in my pack. Okay, so my warmer stuff that we're going to talk about in a minute is packed away in my pack, but I'm going to start out in this with my hiking shoes, all right? And that's going to be where I would start that day. If you have a cooler day and it's showering, or it's in the 40s or 50s when you get up, you might start out with a long sleeve layer, or even your rain shell on the top over this, or maybe your wind pants pulled on over your shorts for getting as you start out up the trail. The idea is, as you climb and as you warm up and start sweating and heat up, you peel layers off as you need to, and they go into your pack. And then if the wind kicks up, if the weather changes, if you cross tree line and all of a sudden you're exposed and the weather starts getting different, you add layers back on. And definitely when you get to the summit, you're putting on your warm stuff. On all but the best days of the year, you're putting your warm stuff back on at the summit. But on a warm day, that's what I would start out with right there. A lot of the layers that I have to show you are right here, are packed up in my pack. So what I think I'd like to do next is, I got this backpack packed up as if I was headed out to climb Katahdin in the morning. It's ready. It has everything in there I would take for a day on the mountain. And what I'm going to do, it's all packed up now. I'm going to unpack it and show you everything that I have packed for a climb of Katahdin. If you look in the chat, we have prepared a packing list for you that you can use on your next hike if you'd like to, called Katahdin Day Hike Packing List. So if you go into the chat, there is a link to download this document, and you can download it to your own computer. You can print it out if you'd like while we're going through this session, if you would like to have it, a copy out in front of you. But this is what I'm going to be working through as we go through the packing list. And this has three categories on it. Essential items. Those are the first things we're going to go through here. That is stuff that you need to pack for Katahdin 100% of the time. On any day of the year, you need these things in your pack. All right. The second category are things that I would add in the spring or in the fall when the weather is cooler, the weather is a bit more iffy. And the last part of the list here are optional things. So we're going to go through those in order and start with the essentials first. Anybody want to guess in the chat what the single most essential item of gear in your bag is? And it's, if you've already downloaded the packing list, you're going to see it's at the top of the list. But I have learned over the years that there is one thing that is absolutely key to having a good day of hiking, and that is plenty of food. So we're going to go through food first. And I know this may seem a little silly. We're all adults. We know how to pack, food for ourselves, but it's different when it is different. You're going to expend, depending on your body size, upwards of a couple thousand calories climbing Katahdin. And if you don't replace those calories, you're going to end up using them, glycogen from your muscles and other places, and getting fairly depleted over the course of the day. which never leads anywhere good. Okay, we're going to talk about that later. The pile that I have in front of me here is what I would pack for a day on Katahdin. It is a lot of food. It is more than I actually plan to eat on that day, but it's always good to have a little of extra insurance in case you end up spending some extra time that you weren't anticipating on the mountain. That does happen from time to time, and it's good to not be hungry when you're already in that situation. So the pile that I have in front of me is about 3,500 calories is what I have piled up here in front of me. As I mentioned, that's a little more than almost anyone except a ravenous teenager is actually likely to eat in a day on Katahdin. But if I were hiking with a group, between myself and sharing this with the people I was hiking with, I think pretty much all this would be gone at the end of the day. So I'm going to walk you through what I have here and give you some suggestions for what you might consider packing. Really what we're looking for is food that is calorie dense, all right? A bag of chips, poor choice. It's going to take up half your pack. And you're going to use up a ton of space for that amount of calories. A bag of energy bars, this little bag in front of me has 4 energy bars in it, and this is 1,000 calories right here. This is almost half of what I need for the day that I'm going to expend during the day on the mountain, okay? So I have 3 different brands in here, 4 different bars in this bag. I have some cheese and crackers, which I'm planning to share with the people I'm hiking with. And a little bag of these, break them out probably at lunch on the summit and share them with people. I have a knife in here for the cheese, crackers, apple to go with it, nothing like apple and sharp cheddar, and a bag of cookies, and I've got a bag of Gorp. It's almonds, craisins, walnuts, pumpkin seeds. It's one of those Hannaford blends that you can pick up all pre-mixed there. I've got a bag of that. So this pile, make sure I didn't forget something down in here. Oh yeah, and then a couple of meat sticks for the carnivores out there. Easy, quick protein source. These are each about 60 calories, I believe. So not a major contributor in terms of calories, but just some protein and some variety from all the carbs. So what you're really looking for are complex carbs, mix of complex carbs, proteins, and fats. If you go with all one nutrient group, all simple carbs, for example, you're just going to crash and burn during the course of the day. So it's really good to eat a balance of food. Bring stuff to share. It's always really nice if somebody else doesn't bring quite enough to be able to offer them something, and somebody else in your group. And stuff that's not going to get banged up in your pack, all right? Stuff that's durable, preferably water resistant. Right? Banana, love bananas, but not a great choice because it's going to get destroyed in your pack and you have to pack out the peel. And please do keep that in mind as you're packing your food. Baxter is a carry-in, carry-out park. Everything that you take in with you needs to go out with you. So the wrappers from your food, the Ziploc bags, all that stuff goes out with you at the end of the day. So just keep that in mind as you're packing your food. So plenty of food. Item number 1, pack as much as you think you need, and then pack a little bit more, would be my advice. All right, at least 3 liters of water. I know the general guideline for the outdoors is often 2 liters. You'll see that for other mountains and other guidelines. 2 liters is just not enough for a long day hike on Katahdin. You need at least 3, and a couple ways to get that. There's the basic 1 liter Nalgene bottle, which we're all familiar with. I've got one of those packed up in my pack. And then I have something that I like to use. So I've got a 2 liter hydration reservoir in my pack as well. And between those two things, the reservoir and the bottle, I have 3 liters. The reason I do the bottle instead of a 3 liter reservoir is I have had many climbs of Katahdin where I've been sipping away, staying hydrated with my reservoir. I'm halfway up the cathedral trail. I take a big gulp of water and there's that gurgle that happens when you're at the very end of your reservoir. I actually ran out halfway up the ascent one time and was out of water. I went through my 3 liters in the first 3 hours of my hike and then was bumming for the rest of the day. And I just kind of overdid it and drank more than I really needed during that time. So I usually bring 2. And when you hear that gurgle at the bottom, you still have another liter in reserve for the rest of the day. Something else I wanted to mention with hydration is you should have 3 liters in your pack. Every single member of your party should have 3 liters in their pack. I very frequently hike with people who will say something like, oh, I've got 3 bottles of water packed. Yeah, no problem. All right. Bottles are not all the same. This bottle, the green one, is half the volume of this one. This is 17 ounces. This is 32. If you pack 3 of these, you only have 1.5 liters of water, and you are going to run out and be in rough shape by the afternoon. So I really recommend that you make sure that you've got the full 3 liters of volume. Something else I like to recommend with water, when you wake up in the morning before your climb, drink 1 liter of water between the time that you get up and when you start out on the trailhead. When you're driving in the car, or when you're making breakfast at camp, whatever, go through 1 liter of water before you start so that you're hydrated when you start your hike. Then you've got your 3 liters in your pack. And every time I do a big hike like Katahdin, I have 1 gallon of water waiting in the car for when we all stagger back to the car at the end of a long day. Everybody can fill up their water bottles with that gallon that's sitting in the trunk. It's often warm, especially if it's summer, but it is so nice when you're out of the water you had to hike in, just to have that waiting for you at the end of the day. So plenty of food, 3 liters of water. We're going to move into the other stuff now. And I'm going to keep pulling things out of my pack so you can see everything that's crammed in here. All right. So the next item on our packing list, for those of you who downloaded it and have it in front of you, is rain gear. And the rain gear is, I put it third on the list right after food because it is an absolutely critical item. All right, you need to have a rain shell and rain pants that are actually waterproof, or as waterproof as product can be. And you need to have those accessible in your pack. I very foolishly put mine on the bottom underneath all the other stuff, which would not be the first time, but they're essential to have in your pack, and preferably near the top of your pack, especially if the weather's looking iffy. So top and bottom rain gear. We already talked about sturdy, lightweight hiking shoes or boots. That's the next item on the list. All right, next item, and this is something that I got a lot of pushback on from people, especially on a hot summer day, is a winter hat. You should have a winter hat in your pack every single hiking day of the season on Katahdin. It can snow in all 12 months of the year up there, and it frequently does. And even on the most beautiful summer day, you should have a winter hat in your backpack. You never know when the weather's going to turn. You have heard the statistics about how much body heat we lose through our heads. Having this little item in your pack could very well save your life if you end up in a tough situation. So do not skimp on the hat. This is a lightweight one that I would take in summer. Other times of the year, I would level up to a warmer hat. Somewhere here, I even have like a bomber style hat that I wear in the winter and late fall trips, but have a lightweight hat like this in your pack at all times. All right, next item, a pair of lightweight gloves. This is primarily for warmth, but I know a fair number of people who hike Katahdin in gloves because it's a mountain where you absolutely have to use your hands. There's no way to get up Katahdin without using your hands that I'm aware of. That's at one point or another. So gloves can be protective, so your hands don't get all scraped and bashed up as you're climbing the mountain, and they're also really important for warmth if you end up in chilly conditions up above tree line. So a pair of lightweight gloves. This is one of the most important items in my pack, a warm, insulating midweight layer, okay, for your upper body. So this is an Ella Bean pullover, synthetic, quilted stuff. I love this thing, really nice. This is in my pack very frequently. This would go on over my hiking shirt. This would be my second layer right after my hiking shirt would be this. So if I started to get chilly, this would be the thing I would throw on first. All right. We already talked about The next item on the list is extra top and bottom layers. I'm going to circle back to that when we talk about trips in early, late season and tougher weather conditions. Next item on the list is a headlamp and spare batteries. This is the only item on the packing list that the park actually requires every hiker to carry by regulation. So every hiker in the park has to carry, whether you're on Katahdin or not, has to carry a working flashlight. And that is so that if you end up out on the trail later than you intended and you're hiking back in the dark, with a headlamp, you're hiking back. Without a headlamp, you are waiting to be rescued because you can't hike back without light. So having a working headlamp, check it ahead of time to make sure it's working, and then spare batteries that are the right size for your headlamp in your pack as well. If you are certain that your hike is going to involve darkness, that you're going to start early, that you're going to be finishing late, if you know you're going to be hiking in the dark and you're planning on that, I would actually bring a whole second headlamp as a spare. These things do act up sometimes, especially in bad weather if water gets in them. So having a spare headlamp in your pack is a great idea if you're planning an early alpine start, or it's in the fall and you expect that you might be hiking in early or late in the day. All right, sun protection is the next item. So we have the items that I would recommend you bring for sun protection are a hat and a pair of sunglasses and some sunscreen, which preferably, and you know, if all you can do is dose up in the morning before you leave camp and you don't want to carry it, that's okay. If you have a little tube you can carry, the sun is very intense at higher elevations, sunglasses and a sun hat to keep the sun out of your eyes. All right, a whistle or other signaling device. Really, really important to have in your pack. A signaling device is one of the 10 essentials that you'll hear about over and over again in the outdoors. This is one of the fancy, really, really loud ones that can be heard miles away. There are many other kinds out there. These ones I think I ordered in a pack of 10 and to share around with people who I thought might needed one. They're just not even $1 a piece. This one appeared at my house. I think one of my kids brought it home from school. It does not have to be a fancy thing, but you need something to create a very loud sound if you get lost so that rescuers can find you. So absolutely have a whistle in your pack. Many new backpacks come with a whistle built into the sternum strap. And if your pack has that, you're set. And you don't need to worry about bringing an additional whistle. All right, next item, medical kit. Absolutely critical that this is in your pack. If you're hiking with a group of 5 or 6 people, as long as you're all going to stay together, every person does not need to carry a complete medical kit. But if you're not sure if your friends are going to remember, if you're considering splitting up and hiking at different paces during the day, absolutely make sure that you have this in your pack. It is one of those things that you'll just kind of forget it's there until you really need it, and then you'll be very, very glad that it's there. And in addition to medical supplies, a short section of duct tape and some basic gear repair items like safety pins, and there's some special tape that you can fix a rip in a down jacket, that kind of thing. Extremely helpful to have in your med kit. So that should be in your pack. I'm not going to go into any more detail than that. We could do a whole session just on what to put in here, but make sure you have a medical kit. All right, next item, up-to-date trail map. Up-to-date is the key part of that. This is my favorite map to the park. It's made by Map Adventures in Portland. Wonderful map, and Steve and Angela, the owners of this company, do a great job of keeping it up to date. This is the 3rd edition. It just came out just over a year ago. And so make sure that you have an up-to-date current map in your pack. This is waterproof, and all the trails in the park that have changed in recent years, all those updates are in here. So you can be confident that the information is correct. So a map, absolutely critical, and then a compass. Compasses are I'm hearing more and more people be fairly disparaging towards compasses as being really old school and not something that we should need to carry in the age of GPS watches and standalone GPSs. I pretty strongly disagree. Anything with a battery, anything that receives a signal from somewhere else can act up in the outdoors and often does. And it's really nice to have something that just works consistently with really simple technology that's very tough to break. It's really important to have in your pack. If you're on the tableland and the clouds sweep in and all of a sudden visibility is 10 feet and you're really not sure, which direction you're headed in, incredibly helpful to have this, and it's going to be there when you need it. So hopefully one of those items you never have to pull out of your pack, but it's really important to have it there. For the GPS diehards, it is okay. Obviously, if you're a GPS person, you like tracking your hikes, to do that on your GPS watch or on, if you really want to carry a standalone GPS like this up Katahdin, I suppose you could. But it is not a substitute for having a really good trail map and a compass with you, more of a supplement. But if you want to bring it, many people can find those valuable. All right. Next item, a lightweight knife. This is a little Opinel knife that I've had forever. Extremely lightweight, just not even an ounce, a couple ounces at the most. And great for getting lunch together wherever you stop on the trail, and for emergencies of all sorts. Important item to have in your pack. You don't need to pack some giant Bowie knife, and you wouldn't want to from a weight perspective, but just something nice and functional and lightweight with a locking blade so that your hiking buddies don't cut their finger and necessitate the med kit. All right, next item is a fire kit. Even if you're just going out for the day, not planning to camp, just a simple day hike, have a fire kit in your backpack. It is absolutely essential that you carry this. In mine, I've got a lighter and some strike anywhere matches with a striking, a piece of striking surface. And good to have a couple options, not just one. Lighters get wet, they're really finicky. Matches get wet, obviously the same thing. So having a backup plan in the fire department is really good. So in a waterproof Ziploc bag in your pack. A lot of people like ferro rods. I love mine. That's one of those rods where you that you scrape and ignite magnesium shavings. Incredibly good for lighting a fire in windy or wet conditions. A little bit heavier than what I've got here, but a great option if you have one of those. All right, next item. The only item on this list that I do not have in my pack because I lent it to someone is having a waterproof bivy sack or a homemade waterproof shelter of some kind. I know that shelter sounds giant, like something you wouldn't want to have in your day pack, but many of you have probably seen that space blanket type material with a foil reflective on one side. The really old ones were just the foil. Most of the ones made today are foil on one side and like a tough orange layer on the other. They make those that are actually formed into a tube shape, like a sleeping bag that you can crawl inside if you're really cold, really hypothermic, somebody's injured in a bad weather situation. Those things are incredibly helpful in those situations. So they're very small, just a few ounces. They fold up like that. It's called an emergency bivy sack. You open it up, can climb inside and be really quite well protected from the elements. But those things are expensive, let alone a real bivy sack, Gore-Tex one, those are hundreds of dollars. The space blanket type that I mentioned, probably $30 to $50 for a good quality one. But I want to describe to you how to make a homemade one to keep in your pack for the next time you go. It just costs a few bucks of materials, and once I discovered these, they're just fabulous, and I really love them. So what you do, if you're familiar with that Tyvek material that people use to wrap houses in, it's like a white, fibery, flexible, waterproof material that gets wrapped around houses as a vapor barrier and moisture barrier. Tyvek is also made into suits for like hazmat type disposable suits. It's an incredibly durable material. So one of my friends taught me a few years ago that you can make a bivy sack out of Tyvek. You cut a square 6 feet by 7 feet, fold it over in half, so it's 3 by 7. And then if you have access to a sewing machine, sew around the perimeter. If you don't, duct tape works fine. And then you have a waterproof, windproof, highly protective sleeping bag, basically, that you can climb inside if things get rough. And I know people who sleep outside in these, in their sleeping bags, and it keeps the rain off. They're incredibly durable, will last for years. Just a few bucks of materials if you have some scrap Tyvek kicking around. So I highly recommend that you either pick one up at the store or make one like I just described and keep that in your pack. If somebody gets injured up above tree line, if bad weather blows in and somebody's getting hypothermic, those things save lives on a regular basis, and they're really worth the space in your pack. The Tyvek ones that I mentioned fold up to very small and take up hardly any room in your pack at all. Final gear item, and then we're going to move on, is any gear specific to the people in your party. Knee braces, inhalers, meds, anything that is specific that people in your party need or you need, make sure you don't forget it and make sure it has room in your pack. All right, moving on to some additional items for early and late season. At cooler times of year, and that would be May, June, September, and October, really everything other than July and August. And even in July and August sometimes, in periods of cooler weather, you need more in your pack than what I just described. And what I would recommend bringing on in those cooler weather times of year would be a really warm down or fleece jacket in your pack. All right, this is an old beat up LL Bean jacket that has holes in it that I've patched up. It is great for that kind of thing, for cramming in the bottom of your pack if you need it. If I'm expecting really cold weather, I will break out the big, thick, puffy winter down coat. And I will stuff this in the bottom of my pack. Takes up a little bit more space. I cannot tell you how many times I've actually pulled this out on hikes, put it around somebody at the summit who's cold, worn it myself if I'm getting cold. Incredibly valuable. I would not hike Katahdin without a jacket like this, really, for most of the year. Only the best bluebird warm days in July and August would I leave this behind. Otherwise, I'm going to have this or a lighter weight down jacket in my pack for sure. Okay, other gear for cooler weather. We talked about pants before a little bit. So your basic Katahdin gear for warm weather would be a pair of shorts and then a pair of hiking pants, something like this. These are tights that you can wear, or a pair of wind pants, like I have here somewhere. These are your basic Katahdin bottom layers for most weather conditions. If you're expecting to hike on a really cool September day, a day in October where there are snow flurries in the forecast, a cold day in May or June, you need something more than this. And so what I would recommend in those situations is a pair of insulated hiking pants. These are fleece-lined soft shell pants. I think I got them at Rennie's. They were not expensive, $20 or $25, but they are incredible. I've actually hiked Katahdin in the middle of February in these pants. They're warm, they're water resistant, they're great for cooler weather. So if you're going to be climbing in cooler weather, make sure you have a pair of insulated pants, and not like sweatpants or fleece pants with no protection from the elements. Something with a little bit of shell to them is pretty essential in cooler weather. So a warmer top layer, we talked about, the big heavy jacket, a warmer bottom layer, essential. The other thing that you should consider putting in your pack if you're going to be hiking in shoulder seasons when it's going to be below freezing is a pair of micro spikes. These are a little beefier than yak tracks or similar things like that we all have around for shoveling the driveway and whatnot. Micro spikes, everything that's underneath your foot is metal. There's no rubber anywhere underneath your foot. They're a lot less prone to break. And the points on them are probably a 1/4 inch long. So a pair of micro spikes in your pack. If there's rime ice on the rocks and when you're climbing in October, if there's still pockets of snow around and you're climbing early in the season, micro spikes can absolutely save the day and possibly save your life in those types of conditions. A lot of people take falls in those sorts of conditions that they wouldn't have if they had these on their feet. So these are heavy. It's a commitment to take these in your pack, but if there's any chance of below freezing weather and icing on the trail, have these in your pack. If you really want to be sure in shoulder seasons, the next step up is a pair of trail crampons. So these are small, lightweight crampons with 1/2 inch points. There aren't too many days during the May through October season where you're ever going to need these. But if you are hiking Katahdin late in the season and it's bad enough that you're thinking about these, you probably shouldn't be up there hiking and you should probably pick another day. But these are, if for whatever reason you need them, these are an option as well. And then finally, a warmer hat and gloves. If you're going to be hiking in cold weather, really worth bringing a beefier hat and gloves, something more substantial than what I just showed you. Full finger gloves, a warmer, thicker hat will be really important. All right, I'm going to do a quick run through the optional stuff because I'm mindful of time and we have a lot less left to cover. Some optional but highly recommended items: hiking poles. Especially if you have any joint issues or you're someone who really feels the impact on the descent, hiking poles are incredibly helpful. If you can strap those to the side of your pack, you don't need to use them all the time, but they're there when you need them. Electrolyte powder. If I had to recommend one item that can really save the day on a big Katahdin hiking day, so many people get dehydrated on the mountain. So many people get shaky because their low blood sugar or their electrolyte balances are off. Taking a standard bottle of water and adding electrolyte powder to it is an absolute game changer for when people are really starting to hit a wall, really getting tired, getting shaky. This can really help. So the stuff I have here is unflavored. It's the World Health Organization kind of oral rehydration salt stuff. You can also go right to the grocery store and pick up electrolyte powder. There's a brand called Element, a brand called Liquid IV. It's not cheap, but a few bucks can really turn your day around and make sure you have a good day on Katahdin. So I'm a relatively new convert to this stuff. It's just been a few years, but incredibly helpful for a positive day. Bug dope. If you're hiking in the spring, shouldn't be on the trail in Baxter without bug dope. A Reco Rescue reflector. These things are sewn into some outdoor clothing, particularly higher end shells, like rain shells, and some backpacks and winter ski gear often have these reflectors sewn into them. And what this is it is a material that is it's able to be picked up by the sensing equipment in rescue helicopters that people, if someone's lost and there's folks out searching for them, an aircraft, this thing blinks and just lights up on their sensing equipment if somebody has one of these on there in their clothing, and it can make you much, much easier to find if you're lost. So if you haven't heard of them, look it up. They're worth checking out. An ultralight windbreaker or wind shirt, especially on a summer day where it's going to be hot, but you're going to be in the wind. That can be a great choice. A lightweight windbreaker in your pack. A satellite communication device. That means a Spot, a Garmin InReach, or if you have many smartphones, including, I believe, iPhones from iPhone 14 onward, have the ability to communicate via satellite directly from your phone and get a message out. Some way to get a message to people if you have no cell reception is what we're looking for here. So the items that I mentioned, the InReach, the Spot, and many newer phones, you can do that. The time to figure that out is not when you are already in trouble. Try to figure it out before you go and see if you have access to one of those options. All right, this is my favorite item on the optional list. I've done a lot of hiking in the park with groups of school kids, my own children. groups of adults, doesn't really matter, who everybody likes treats, especially when you're in the middle of doing something hard. And so something that I like to do on my hikes of Katahdin is to sneak some stuff into my pack. I don't usually let the people that I'm hiking with see it ahead of time, especially if it's my kids. But I like to have some trail goodies hidden away in my pack. So chocolate bar, absolute game changer for if morale is sagging, people are getting tired, getting cranky. A bar of chocolate, you'd be amazed, can really help turn things around. A lot of calories in a small amount, and also just a lot of happiness for those of us who love chocolate. Great way to boost morale. Candy. This should not be a core part of your food planning for the day. This should be a tiny little treat supplement, not really like what you're planning to eat the most of, but as a little extra add-on treat, it is awesome for boosting morale, especially if you're hiking with kids. Everybody's trudging down the trail, kicking rocks, exhausted, grumpy. You pull out a bag of their favorite candy, and all of a sudden things are looking up again. So a little bit of trail magic for your hiking companions and yourself is well worth the weight in your pack. We already talked about it, having an extra gallon of water waiting in your vehicle for when you get back. That's next on the list. And then finally, the last thing I wanted to mention is a waterproof pack cover. We talked about rain gear for yourself, but having rain gear for your backpack and your stuff is really helpful. Not every pack comes with one. You can pick up an aftermarket one online for $10 that'll fit your pack. Well worth having if you're going to be hiking on an iffy day. All right, I think we're at the end of gear. If you have gear related questions, I can see that there are some questions accumulating. So thank you, those of you who have asked questions already. But we're going to shift gears now and move on to the next stage of what we're going to talk about. And that is route selection and how to climb, which way you're going to go up Katahdin. So we are going to shift gears, and I'm actually going to share my screen, and we're going to talk through some of the different choices and the different trails that you have available to you for climbing Katahdin. Before we do that, I just want to mention one thing. We're going to talk about a lot of different ways to climb, a lot of different trails, a lot of different choices you have for how to go up the mountain. All of them, every single one of them, involve about 4,000 vertical feet of climbing. Katahdin Stream is at about 1,100 feet, A-Ball's at about 1,300, Roaring Brook's at a little over 1,400, 1,475. You've got to go from there up to 5,200 feet. All right, so every one of the trailheads, doesn't matter where you start, there's going to be about 4,000 feet of climbing. None of the options we're about to talk about are easy. All right, they're all challenging, but there are some that are less challenging than others. And so I'm going to try to give you a menu of options and walk you through all the different trails you have to choose from for planning a hike. But no matter which one we pick, doesn't matter if it's the less challenging one or the more challenging one, the basic guideline is to plan on 8 to 12 hours for a round trip Katahdin hike, no matter which route you pick. I see very few people doing round trip Katahdin hikes in 8 hours. For most people, I think 10 to 12 is more standard. And for some hikers, for those of us who are slower hikers, it can be well over 12 hours. I've known people who have taken 14 plus or well longer than that to climb the mountain and go at their own pace. And so baking that into your planning from the start as you're picking a route is really important, just to understand that no matter what you pick, it's a full day commitment, and an early start is really helpful. So as you're choosing a route, before we jump into looking at the specific routes, basically the way you want to approach this is to just think about what you want to get out of the day. Who are you going with? What's their hiking ability? What's your hiking ability? Does anyone in your group have a debilitating fear of heights? Is anyone nursing an injury and maybe not quite at their best? What's the weather likely to be for your trip? If you're on an exposed ridge line for most of the time on a windy day, is that where you want to be? Would you rather be in a more protected area and just pop out into the wind at the last minute before getting to the summit? These are the sorts of things that you can weigh ahead of time as you're thinking about your route. but most importantly, talk to the people you're going with. See if they have a trail they want to hit. See if they're feeling scared about heights. See if they're feeling nervous about their physical ability, and factor that into your decision making as you decide which of these routes to choose. Okay, so I'm going to hop off this camera for a minute, and I'm going to share my screen, and we are going to move through some different trail options that you have at your disposal. All right, so you should be seeing a web browser window now. We are going to use a tool called Strava to check out all these trails and for me to show you the maps, all these trail maps that we're going to be looking at. And we're going to work our way through these together in this web browser window. So this first trail that we're going to be looking at, we're starting over on the west side of Katahdin. I'm going to zoom out for a minute so you can see where we are. Okay, so here's Katahdin, right here in the middle. Millinocket is down here, just off the bottom of the screen. So we're starting from over here on the west side of Katahdin, and we're going to take a look at the Hunt Trail first. The Hunt Trail leaves from Katahdin Stream Campground. That's right over here by the little green dot. The Hunt Trail is also the last 5 miles of the Appalachian Trail. So it's the only hiking trail in Baxter that is blazed with white blazes instead of blue. It's actually, I think, one of the tougher ways up Katahdin. I didn't have that opinion in high school, but as I've hiked it more and more, I really think it is one of the most challenging round trips on the mountain. There is a lot of boulder scrambling, a lot of long reaches, some exposed ridgeline hiking along the way too. But I'm going to show you, we're going to click here, and I'm going to show you what this trail looks like if you are starting from the bottom, from Katahdin Stream Campground. So the little green dot is where you'd be starting, and the trail starts out through this lower elevation here and works its way up onto the slopes of Katahdin. And I'm going to play this forward so you can see the little red dot move its way up. Right there, the trail crosses Katahdin Stream, and Katahdin Stream Falls is just above upstream there. Very worthwhile stop if you're hiking the Hunt Trail. Absolutely gorgeous spot to stop and take a water break. So and the trail to the Owl branches off just before there, right? You can see the little white trail to the Owl going up that way. And then you really start climbing up through the woods, steeper and steeper and steeper. Okay. And if you notice down here on the bottom, this is the elevation profile of the trail. So it's really a pretty steady grind up from Katahdin Stream Campground right up to this point where there's kind of a break in slope. Let's see what that looks like. Right there, where the dot is now, that's called the gateway. And that is, you break up out of the trees onto this ridge line that you're looking at here. And all of a sudden, this beautiful panoramic view opens up in front of you of Keep Ridge going up in front of you, and just beautiful, beautiful scenery. But this section is famous for several things. And one of them is false summits. So as you hike up through this section, it actually can be fairly challenging. You'll think you're about to break out on the tableland, and then it's just a false summit until you get to here when you actually do break out onto the tableland. So that stretch we just blazed through is a lot of boulders. The only iron rung in the park, if you've ever hiked in Acadia, the Beehive or anything like that, there are iron rungs everywhere. There's only one that I know of in the park, and it's right down here. Actually two. There's one other on a different mountain, but there's only one on Katahdin, and it's right here on the Hunt Trail for a long reach. So this trail can be tough for anyone under 5 feet tall, often needs a boost, or really to try pretty hard scrambling up and over. There are some longer reaches, and a lot of boulders and a lot of false summits. And eventually you pop out on the tableland, and you've got over a mile on the tableland going by Thoreau Spring there, up along until you get to the summit. And so that route is the way that Appalachian Trail through hikers finish, northbound hikers finish their through hikes on Katahdin. So really famous, really well-known, really beloved trail, but not a good first route, I would say. It's a beautiful trail, but it's not a trail that I would choose for a first-time Katahdin hike, or if you have first-time Katahdin hikers in your group, I would do one of the easier trails before I would take someone up Hunt Trail. All right, moving on to the next trail around. The Hunt Trail is over here to the north, and now we're going to look at the A-Ball Trail. That's the one that you can see in red now on screen. So A-Ball Trail leaves from A-Ball Campground, and this is the shortest round trip route to the summit. It's about 4 miles, depending on who you ask, but it is a pretty direct route, and you can see here, the trail kind of swerves off to the left, and there's this big rock slide here. That's the old A-Ball slide, and the trail was moved off of that about a decade ago because a large amount of the slide moved and buried the trail under a dozen or more feet of debris, very unstable. So the trail was relocated over to the left here up this other ridgeline, but you can still see the slide very close by off to your right as you climb. So let's take a look at what that looks like as we cruise up through. All right, so we're going to start down at A-Ball Campground here, up through the woods, climbing steadily, all the way up through here, gaining elevation. You can see the elevation profile down below until we go off onto the reroute. All right, in this section we're at now, I'm actually going to zoom back a little bit. Right there where you start swerving off into the woods away from the slide, the forest is really starting to thin out. And really when you get over to about here, you're not really at tree line yet, but it's starting to get a lot more exposed, and the trees are really scrubby, and the view starts opening up more. And you kind of switch back up through the woods here, boulder scrambling, steep, and paralleling the slide here until you rejoin the old trail right there. So for those of you who have hiked A-Ball years ago, this is where the new trail rejoins the old one right at the top of the slide. A lot of people get their hopes up and think that when they get to that point, they're going to be at the tableland, but there's actually still a bit to go. And up here is right there is where you cross into the tableland. Right up here, you meet up with the Hunt Trail at Thoreau Spring and carry on across the tableland up to Baxter Peak, right there. So you can see that you get most of the climbing done before you hit the tableland and a little bit once you're on the tableland up to the peak. So I think A-Ball is a good first route for people going up the mountain. There are a few longer reaches. They're not insurmountable. There's some scrambling. It's a little less dicey than some other trails. It's a good way, if you're going to take someone day hiking up the mountain from this side, that A-Ball Trail is the way to do it. So let's move on and keep going around the mountain. Just to orient you, we're at the Huron-Taylor Trail now. A-Ball and Hunt were over on the west side of the mountain. Now we're over on the east side, and we're leaving from Roaring Brook Trailhead now. Okay, so the red line is the Huron-Taylor Trail, named after famous park superintendent Helon Taylor, not Helen. So if you hear anyone call him Helen Taylor, you can fix it. It is Helon. And the Huron-Taylor Trail was named in his honor. And it starts out from Roaring Brook Campground, down here with a green dot, up through the woods. It actually starts out along with the Chimney Pond Trail for just the first few tenths and then swerves off to the left and starts climbing. All up through subalpine forest, gaining elevation steadily until you start popping out on this ridge on the backside of Pomola. Right up here, the top where you can see the top part of the trail right now, that's Pomola Peak that the trail is heading toward. And so it's going to climb really steadily up through the woods. A few switchbacks, but not really that many. Pretty much a straight ridgeline hike up to Pomola Peak. That is one of the things to know if you choose to hike by the Huron-Taylor Trail, is that it does not end at Baxter Peak. All right, there's been a lot of disappointment over the years from people who found out about that one a little bit late in the process. You actually end at Pomola. The trail ends right here. To get to Baxter Peak, you have to continue on across the knife edge, which is the next mile beyond here that's shown in red. That's actually we're going to talk about that trail in a minute separately, because it's really its own, it's in a class of its own. So the Helon-Taylor Trail, pretty steady grind up through. It's a very direct way to get from Roaring Brook above tree line. In the same amount of distance it would take you to get to Chimney Pond, in terms of hiking miles, you're at Pomola Peak. So it's a great way to get above tree line quickly. All right. Our next trail is the Dudley Trail. The way we have it laid out here is actually starting way back at Roaring Brook. That's the green dot over here, because if you were going to climb by the Dudley Trail starts at Chimney Pond. So if you want to climb Katahdin via Dudley, you have to get to Chimney Pond first. And since this is the first time we're looking at these trails that go up to Chimney Pond, we're going to start right at the very bottom of how you would climb Dudley, and that's by starting down at Roaring Brook here and by hiking the Chimney Pond Trail. So you'd hike the Chimney Pond Trail up, paralleling Roaring Brook, crossing Pomola Brook, by the Basin Ponds, all the way up past Dry Pond and into the South Basin to Chimney Pond. All right, right back there. When you're right there, you're at the ranger station at Chimney Pond. Right, so that's the Chimney Pond Trail. You've just hiked a little over 3 miles, gained 1,500, almost 2,000 feet of elevation up to Chimney Pond. You're already feeling a little tired, and now you get to start the Dudley Trail. So the Dudley Trail picks up from Chimney Pond and heads up the mountain from there, up to Pomola Peak. It does not go straight to Baxter Peak. Dudley goes to Pomola first. So if you're going to climb by Dudley, you're going to leave from Chimney Pond, traverse a bit, and then start climbing the ridge up to Pomola. This is bouldery, it's steep, it's fun for those of you who like bouldery, steep stuff. Right about here, there's a spur trail over to Pomola Caves, which are beautiful slab caves that you can crawl around in and explore. Really fun to go poke around in there if you've never seen them. Gorgeous alpine scenery here, rock faces as you're looking back into kind of around the shoulder of the side of the Great Basin. Up here, once you get on right up to about there, is something called Index Rock, which is a really famous landmark on Katahdin. You can see it from 20 miles away on a clear day, and it's a giant rock jutting out over the rim of the cliff down into the Great Basin. Really famous landmark. Do not try to climb it. That frequently goes wrong when people try, but it's a really cool spot. And then when you carry on up Dudley, you end up at Pomola Peak, and to get to Baxter Peak, you continue on across the knife edge. Climbing by Dudley is one of the hardest ways to do Katahdin, because you have to get to Chimney, you have to get up Dudley, which is a job in and itself, you have to get across the knife edge, and then you need to get back down. So having Dudley as part of your Katahdin loop is on the more challenging end of the spectrum, which we'll talk about again in a little bit when we talk about loop opportunities. All right, next is Cathedral Trail. Cathedral is hard to pick a favorite, but if I had to pick a personal favorite, it would be Cathedral. Really, really fun trail. Again, we're leaving from Roaring Brook Campground down here at the start, and we're going up the same way we just went up Dudley, up the Chimney Pond Trail, to right there where that little photo symbol is. That's the ranger station at Chimney Pond. And then we start on Cathedral Trail from there. So I'm going to start us from down at the bottom. We're going to retrace our steps up the Chimney Pond Trail, which if you're hiking from Roaring Brook would be the beginning of your attempt at Cathedral. Up we go until we get to the Great Basin and until we get to Chimney Pond, where you are definitely going to want to take a break, take some pictures, rest by the pond, enjoy the view before you set off up the Cathedral Trail, which is a very direct, very steep, very beautiful very challenging route up to the summit. So we're going to start from Chimney. Up we go. That's the reason it's called the Cathedral Trail. I'm going to back up a little bit, is that there are these rock formations you pass by that are very impressive, very tall, sort of soaring cliffs on your left that are called cathedrals. That's where they get their name. The trail gets its name, and there are 3 of them. And so right about here, you're passing the first, you're gone by the first cathedral, that's the second, and then the third right there. One of them you can get out and scramble out onto the top of, and there's an absolutely spectacular snack spot and view, not for those afraid of heights. There's a lot of exposure on this trail, and well, not a lot. There is some spots with exposure on this trail. It is dicey in rain. I would not recommend this on a day when it is raining. It can be really slippery, and the park recommends that you only go up this trail. And we agree. This is not a good trail for descending. This is a trail that is best done in one direction, and that is up. I have been down it before under not less than ideal circumstances, and I would not recommend it. So if you can choose another way down, do it. But it is a wonderful trail for climbing up, and as I said, my favorite way up the mountain from Chimney Pond. All right, right about here, we're cresting out onto the tableland, rejoining the saddle trail, and we're at Baxter Peak in 1.7 miles from Chimney. All right, our next trail moving along is the Saddle Trail. This is another trail that leaves from Chimney Pond, so we're going to retrace our steps up from, again, you would be leaving from Roaring Brook, same place as before, same trailhead, cruising on up to Chimney Pond. And the saddle route, which we're going to get to in just a second, is, I think, if I had to pick, as I said, there are no easy ways up the mountain, but if I had to pick the least hard way up the mountain, it would be kind of a toss-up between A-Ball and Saddle, but I think Saddle might win out as the easier of the two. It was my first route up the mountain when I was pretty little, and if I were to take my own, if I were to take young kids up myself, anytime, this would be the way I would take them. New Katahdin hikers, people afraid of heights, people who dislike scrambling. There is still some scrambling on this trail, but there is less than the other ways. So it's a great option and a great introduction to the mountain for your first Katahdin hike. So it's 2.2 from Chimney Pond up, and all the way from Roaring Brook, it's 5.5 up to the top, up the Saddle Trail. There's a little more time in the trees than the other routes, which you can see as we're tracing along here. You're really in the scrubby trees right up until you get to about here, up onto the saddle slide. There's a lot of loose footing on the slide itself. The park has been doing some really excellent trail work up there, but it's still quite slippery in spots and loose. And then you're at Baxter Peak. All right, 2.2 miles. All right, one more route, 2 more routes that I'd like to cover briefly. No talk about Katahdin would be complete without talking about the Knife Edge. So the Knife Edge, I've seen it referenced in some materials, particularly from other states and other parts of the country, where people are talking about the Knife Edge and saying, oh, it's only a mile. You can get to the top of Katahdin in a mile on that trail. That's amazing. I can do that. And I've had people think that, not really realize going into it that the trail starts, the beginning and ending of the trail are already up on top of the mountain. You have to do a lot of hiking just to get to the beginning of this trail on Pomola Peak. So the Knife Edge Trail stretches between Pomola Peak, which is here with this green dot, and Baxter Peak, which is this black and white dot over here at the end. And there is no other mile of trail in the eastern US that is like it. The Knife Edge is tough. It is utterly spectacularly beautiful. There is major exposure. unless you're a rock climber and you have a different definition of exposure, for 99% of humanity, this trail has a lot of exposure, long drops on either side. There's a couple spots, particularly in this first section. I believe the toughest section of the knife edge is really this first quarter mile from Pomola Peak over through something called the Chimney, which is right here, which is a cleft in the knife edge where you drop down into it and then climb out the other side, and then going around Chimney Peak, which is right there where the red dot is. And once you're through that section, really the rest of it, there's a little bit of exposure, but it's really not too bad. So the only real tough part for most people is this section right here by Pomola Peak. But I would actually recommend, if you're going to do the knife edge, I think it's easier to do in this direction that we're tracing right now. You're climbing in this direction. You're actually ascending as you're going up this way most of the time. And I think for whatever reason, it's a little bit easier to be going up it than going down, especially for people who are afraid of heights. Having the ground rising up in front of you feels a little more secure than looking off into empty space when you're descending. So incredibly fun trail. No other mile of trail like it in the eastern US. And it's only a mile long and connects over to Baxter Peak. And so if you're going to do any of the loops that we're about to talk about in a minute on Katahdin, the knife edge is involved in many of those. One final trail, and then we're going to move on. I'm looking at the time, and I may need to start moving a little bit more quickly here, is the Hamlin Ridge Trail, which makes a pretty incredible loop hiking opportunity. This is probably the toughest. I think this is the toughest loop on Katahdin that doesn't require you to be an ultra runner. And there are some other ways coming in from the north that are longer, but in terms of what mortals typically do on Katahdin, I think this is the toughest loop. It is an incredible loop, starting at Roaring Brook, up the Chimney Pond Trail, following along with the dot here. The Hamlin Ridge Trail starts right here and follows Hamlin Ridge up. I'm going to tweak the orientation so you can see just how cool this is. So starting from Roaring Brook, we're heading up toward Katahdin. Same way we went up to go to Chimney Pond with all the other hikes. And just beyond Basin Ponds, there's a junction, right about there. And there is a junction and a turn on the right called the North Basin Cutoff that turns off to the right and takes you over into this part of Katahdin, which is way quieter, way fewer people over here than the Chimney Pond area. Really great option if you want solitude. So you take the North Basin Cutoff for a little while, and then here you're on Hamlin Ridge. Okay, so Hamlin Ridge is this beautiful ridge line going up to the tableland of Katahdin. One of the prettiest hikes in the state of Maine, in my opinion, because you're looking out to both sides, into the beautiful North Basin over here on your right, into the Great Basin on your left. Utterly spectacular, and you will likely not see too many people on it compared to the other Katahdin trails. It tends to be, it still sees a fair amount of hiking traffic, but nothing like the other trails we just talked about on a busy summer day. So you top out up here at Hamlin Peak, right there, which is on the 4,000 footers list for Maine, depending on which list you use. And here you're going to take a left, carry on down through the saddle, start climbing again up to Baxter Peak, over the knife edge, over to Pomola Peak, take a right onto the Helon-Taylor Trail, and right about here, when you drop below tree line, you have been above tree line for probably 4 or 5, 6 hours at that point, with an incredible view the entire time. So this is only for the best weather days. Otherwise, it's going to be dangerous and probably a sufferfest as well. So only the strongest groups on the best weather days should really attempt this one. So you're back below tree line now and headed back to Roaring Brook. I'm going to pause it there since we've already done this section several times. Okay, so those are your routes up Katahdin. I'm going to stop sharing this screen, and I'm actually going to move us to checking out something else that summarizes some of the information we just looked at. So this is a map of everything we just saw, and all of the different Katahdin trails that are laid out on this map. So you can see all the ones we just talked about here. What I would like to do is put them in context for you so you can see all the different options that we've just talked about. As I mentioned, there really are no easy ways up the mountain. Any of the ways we talked about are challenging. They will challenge really any hiker. We'll find some things that are challenging about any of these trails. But there is a spectrum of difficulty here. So the trails that I would just qualify as hard, but a good entry point would be Saddle and A-Ball. Definitely the easiest out of this bunch. Very hard. Next notch up with the level of difficulty would be doing a round trip on the Hunt Trail, going up Cathedral and down Saddle, the Dudley Knife Edge Saddle Loop, going the other direction, Cathedral, Knife Edge, Huron Taylor, going up A-Ball and down Hunt. That is a popular loop. It involves a 2-mile road walk or a hitchhike at the end to get back to your car, but a lot of people do that. And then going up A-Ball, across the Knife Edge, and down Huron Taylor, totally different side of the mountain. If you have a really nice friend who's willing to drive around and pick you up, you get to traverse the mountain, not retrace your steps. That's a lovely hike if you ever get the opportunity. Next notch up in level of difficulty, what I would call extremely hard. The Cathedral, going up Cathedral, across the Knife Edge, and down Dudley. That is a big day and a tough day. Going up Cathedral and then summiting Katahdin, back down the Saddle up to Hamlin Peak and then down Hamlin Ridge. Another challenging day. Going up the Huron Taylor Trail, across the Knife Edge, and down the Saddle. Long day, tough loop. Some people who are really gluttons for punishment like to do the Knife Edge twice in both directions. If you go up Dudley, you can go back and forth across the Knife Edge and then down the Huron Taylor Trail, and you've gotten to see that mile of trail twice. So if you really love exposure and heights, then that is on the menu. Up Cathedral, back and forth across the Knife Edge, and then down the Saddle Trail. That is a personal favorite of mine, and if it's a good weather day, I will take that opportunity in a heartbeat when I get it. Only the strongest groups on the best weather days should attempt the Hamlin Ridge, Knife Edge, Huron Taylor loop that we were just looking at. That is probably one of the biggest alpine loops, traverses in the state, and it's spectacular, but it's a really big day. You're going to be starting and ending in the dark, very likely, if you try to do that loop. All right, I'm going to move on, and we are going to talk next about weather. All right, so far we've gone through logistics, we've gone through gear, and we've gone through route selection. The next major item for preparation, getting ready for your trip, is factoring in the weather. What I have here on screen are two different weather forecasts from the exact same day. I pulled them at the same time of day. These are two weather forecasts. One's for Millinocket and one is for the top of Katahdin. So I would like you to take a look through those two things and compare them and see what the difference is that you see. All right. The Millinocket forecast is warmer, the winds are lighter, and the skies are clearer. Sunny, mostly clear, sunny. All right. Look up at the top of Katahdin. Mostly cloudy, then partly sunny, then summit in and out of the clouds, then mostly cloudy. All right, where it was clear down below. All right, so more clouds, more precipitation. All right, higher winds and lower temps. The basic guideline is that as you go up in elevation, it's about 5 degrees Fahrenheit per 1,000 feet is a number that I have been using for a long time. It's just kind of a gauge for what you might experience. So for 5,000 feet of elevation gain, you might expect 20, 25 degrees of difference. And that is pretty much what you're seeing in this forecast here. Mid 40s up on top of Katahdin, mid 60s in Millinocket. about 20 degrees cooler on the mountain. So alpine areas are typically windier, colder, more precipitation, lower visibility, and more cloud cover. That is just inherent in alpine areas, and there's no getting around it. If I were to pull forecasts from 100 other days during the year, you would see those patterns play out between lower elevation places and higher elevation places. The winds are often double or more what they are down below. If it's blowing 20 in Millinocket, I would expect 40 to 50 on top of the mountain easily, and sometimes 60 or 70. A windy day down below where you wouldn't want to be out in a canoe on a pond is going to be unpleasantly windy and possibly dangerous on Katahdin. It really is just so much windier up there. So, all right, it can snow in every month of the year. We talked about that earlier, and it does. Many years it snows, and not usually accumulating, but at least spits snow even in the middle of July. It just does. So being tuned into the weather is incredibly important. That means looking at weather forecasts ahead of time. Weather forecasts are not particularly accurate until you get to within 2 or 3 days of the day you're talking about, and then the closer you get to that time, the more accurate they get. A week out, they are almost useless. So do not make the mistake of checking the weather before the weekend before your trip, saying, oh, it's supposed to be 80 and sunny, looks amazing, I'll pack this stuff, and then not checking it again. You will likely be very unpleasantly surprised. Check a up-to-date forecast at the last possible second before you lose the ability to do so. So there are forecasts on the porches at the ranger station. So even when you don't have cell reception, don't have a newspaper, you can check the weather forecast on the porches at the ranger stations in the park. Park staff also have done the work for us of looking at the weather forecast, looking at the conditions, and rating the day, each day, based on a class system, from good, class 1 being good, all the way down to really bad. And so we're going to go through those classes now. And this information is posted really widely. It's available at the Park Visitor Center, at ranger stations. Park staff really do a good job of keeping this out in front of us, so we can use this in our decision making. So class 1, green in color, excellent hiking weather, a great day. Sunshine, maybe some clouds in the mix, low chance of precip, relatively warm temperatures, calm or light winds. Great day. A lot of us call this a bluebird day. Perfect day to be up on the mountain. That does not mean you can leave all this gear we talked about behind. Even on a day like this, a class 1 hiking day, you should have every item that I had in my pack, you should have with you. Do not make the mistake of seeing this and being lulled into thinking that you can just climb in shorts and a t-shirt, carrying a bottle of water and be okay. Weather forecasts are forecasts, they're guesses about what will happen. Things can change. So you always, even on a class 1 day, need to be prepared. Next step down, class 2, fair hiking conditions. A little more of a mix of clouds, some precip, maybe in the forecast, cooler temperatures, or really hot temperatures, heat indexes that are creeping up toward problematic levels, and a little bit more wind going on. Class 3, poor. Not great. Not a great hiking day. You're probably not going to see much on a class 3 day. Clouds, precipitation likely to occur, over 50%. Cool or cold temperatures, or the other direction, extreme caution level heat index. There can be 95-degree humid days in the summer that fall into this category because of the risk of heat index, and then moderate to strong winds. In these conditions, rangers are going to be recommending that you stay below tree line or be extra careful and take the extra gear that we talked about if you do decide to hike on a class 3 day. Class 4 means outright dangerous. Clouds, precip, cold temperatures, danger level heat index, strong winds. On a class 4 day, you are likely not going to be able to see anything. The wind might be blowing so hard that you can't even stand up. And it is not a day that you want to be up on the mountain. If you see this, just turnaround, and do not take the chance on a day like this of being up there. The bad scenarios are much more likely to play out on a day like this than the better weather days. It's just infinitely more likely that you will run into trouble if you venture out in a day like this. So if you see red, the park is going to strongly discourage you from hiking. They will do everything they can to convince you, keep you from going up the trail. One notch past that is the trail is just closed. Park director can choose to just declare a complete closure of the park trail. So that's kind of the fifth and final level. So this information is available to you from park staff who do a great job of assimilating really reliable weather information and coming up with this class day system. So use it and be aware of what class day you have. Ask the ranger if you don't know where to find it. All right, our next topic is risk management, how to stay safe when you're up on the mountain. So far, we've been talking about things you can do to prepare, to pack, to plan, to figure out your route. So the thing about risk is there is risk inherent in all outdoor activities. There is no avoiding that. Climbing a mountain like Katahdin, or any other mountain for that matter, there is just inherent risk in that activity. But we can't eliminate it, but what we can do is minimize it and manage it as best we can. So all of what we've been talking about, logistics, gear, food, hydration, nutrition, route, weather forecasting, backup plans, all of the things we've talked about so far in this presentation, that's all managing risk. Those are all things that you can and should do when planning your trip. But all of the planning in the world and all of the fancy, expensive, high quality gear in the world won't help you if you make awful decisions once you're actually out hiking on the trail. So that's what we're going to talk about next, is managing your risk once you're out hiking, once you've packed your bag, once you've chosen your route, once you're out on the trail with your hiking group, and making decisions about what you're finding on the fly as you go. So I have 5 guidelines for you for how to handle this. First, take responsibility for your own safety. Approach your hike as if there was no help to be had and you needed to be self-sufficient and were fully responsible for your own safety. Pack what you need. Don't assume that help is coming. Be ready to help yourself in the event of an emergency. Be prepared for conditions. All of those things are part of taking personal responsibility for your own safety. The park has signs about a mile into each Katahdin trail that remind you of this, that say, you're entering Maine's largest wilderness. You are responsible for your own safety. The most dangerous attitude here is saying like, I'm just going to go. I'm not going to take a backpack. I'm not going to take a map. If I get into trouble, they'll just call a helicopter and pluck me off the mountain. You'd be surprised, but there are people who approach Katahdin, Washington, other big mountains with that attitude that, if I screw up, they'll just come and rescue me. That is not a good plan, and for many reasons. And you really need to approach this with an attitude of being responsible for your own safety. Next one, pay attention. Stay oriented on your map. Follow along. When you stop and take a snack break, pull out your map, see where you are. Understand the terrain you're traveling through and follow along on the map as you go. Keep an eye on changing weather conditions. A forecast is a guess. Use your eyes and see what's happening around you. If your gut starts talking to you, if you start having a gut feeling, pay attention and listen to it. Look for blazes, watch for cairns on the tableland. Just stay alert to your surroundings. And doing that rather than obliviously trudging along can go a long way to managing and minimizing your risk. Something that you should talk about with your group well before you set out on the trail is a turnaround time. That means a time when, if you're climbing Katahdin, where if you are not to the summit yet by that time, you are going to turn around, whether you make it to the summit or not. Okay, so your group, you might say 1 o'clock is our turnaround time. And if we're not there by 1, we're going to start heading down because we know that it'll be dark, in not too many hours, and we'd like to be down by dark. Once you have chosen a turnaround time, stick to it, right? People get this thing called summit fever, where this happens, especially in the Himalayas and really high mountains where you've put so much planning and so much effort into making a trip happen that you just want to keep going and you want to get to the summit no matter what. And people make really awful decisions when that attitude sets in, and will act in the face of overwhelming evidence that they should turn around. People will carry on, and that story often ends really, really badly. On Katahdin, you should pick a turnaround time with your party, and you should stick to it. Be mindful of sunrise and sunset, and try to pick a time that is roughly halfway between them. So you have equal amounts of daylight for going down and coming up. Don't set your turnaround time for 3 p.m. And in the late fall, you're going to end up doing more than half your hike in the dark. Set a logical turnaround time and stick to it. It's better to pull through to hike another day than to get to the summit that one time. A lot of the stuff we're about to talk about when things go wrong happens when people ignore their turnaround times. Next guideline, stay together. I cannot tell you how many issues, injuries, search and rescue incidents happen when parties split up. If you've read Lost on the Mountain in Maine, the Don Fendler story, you know that story. And you know that was a major part of what happened to Don. Bad things happen when groups split up. And it's best to stay together, communicate well with and check in with the other people in your party, and really take care of each other, check on each other, and stay with your group. If you're in a larger group and it becomes really clear that half the group really isn't feeling it and doesn't want to summit, and the other half, say 3 or 4 people are feeling good, want to keep going, 3 or 4 people want to head back to the trailhead, they both have a med kit, they're both prepared, they communicate that well, that is okay. But when this really becomes a problem is when a group is hiking along, all headed to the summit, and a group gets split up for a reason that is a little bit less planned out in advance. We're going to talk about that in a minute. Things can get problematic in a hurry when groups get separated for less than ideal reasons. So stay together, communicate, talk to each other, look out for each other. And finally, the last one, and hard to pick a most important one from this list, but this is a strong contender, stay on the trail. I think the last statistic that I saw was that 75% of search and rescue incidents start when someone leaves the trail. You massively reduce your risk of getting into trouble if you stay on the trail. And on certain parts of Katahdin, like the slide we're looking at now on the knife edge, staying on the trail on the knife edge is a life and death choice. Multiple people have perished after leaving the trail on the knife edge, thinking that they see an easier way down. That is an imperative. Do not leave the trail on the knife edge. And elsewhere in the park, it's equally good advice elsewhere in the park. Just stay on the trail, and things are much more likely to go well. So that's a good segue into our next topic, is what happens when things go wrong. There is some tough terrain on Katahdin. This slide is somebody scrambling along on the knife edge, going up Chimney Peak. There's some scrambling, there's loose rocks, there's all kinds of things, and things do happen. And the vast majority of people who climb Katahdin climb without injury, without problem. It's a happy, wonderful day, but things do happen. And I want to talk you through, since we've talked so much about preparedness, just a little bit about what happens when things go wrong and don't go well up there. So little things go wrong all the time. All right, that's a normal part of any hike. Somebody's foot is hurting in their boot, or somebody's raincoat is leaking and they're getting cold. I mean, these things happen on hikes all the time, normal stuff, all right? But what happens a lot and what leads to a lot of problems is when errors and challenges and problems start building on each other. It's called compounding errors. So one mistake leads to another, leads to a bigger one, leads to something really bad happening. Okay, so I'm going to walk you through a scenario. Member of a party, their foot is hurting, their boot is chafing, and they're getting a blister. They want to stop and deal with it. Normal stuff, no problem. All right. Say the wind is really whipping on the table and it's starting to rain a little bit. All right. They talk to their group. They say, I'm going to stop for a minute. Just keep on going. I'll catch up with you. Quick conversation. Group takes off. Hiker stays to lace up their boot. While they're staying to lace up their boot, they start getting cold. Their raincoat leaks. They sit in a puddle. All of a sudden, they're a little bit wet. In addition to having a blister forming on their foot, they're wet and cold. All right, and their group has left, and it takes them 3 or 4 minutes to fix their foot situation, carry on hiking. They head off in the direction their group went, get to a trail junction. They didn't talk through with their group which way the group was going to go. There's a couple choices, and the person thinks that their group went off this way, but there's a possibility that they went the other way and they didn't really talk about it ahead of time. At that point, that person's going to make a guess and try to catch up with their group. Again, this is not what you should do, but this is what happens. And takes off the wrong way, goes the opposite way from their group. Keeps getting colder, hypothermic, after another 20 minutes of trying to hike and catch up with their party. They're on the wrong trail. They've lost their group. Group doesn't know where they are. It's like, we're so-and-so. They didn't catch up with us. Said he was just going to stop and fix his boot. So-and-so is on a different trail, half a mile away, in the fog and the rain, mildly hypothermic, and is now separated from their group because of a simple issue over a blister, right? So that's what compounding errors can do. And that kind of thing happens all the time on the mountain. One thing leads to another, leads to a group getting separated. So how can you guard against that? If somebody needs to stop, if the conditions are not great and somebody needs to stop to deal with an issue, let them stop, but stay together as a group and wait with them, all right? In that scenario, they stopped and fixed their boot. They got a little wet and cold, not great. They were with their group. Group members had hats, extra warm layers, gave them to the person who's feeling cold, and problem solved. Everybody's hiking and happy again, all right? So instead of the errors building on each other, they're neutralized by staying together and by supporting one another, by having the stuff in your pack that you should have. So be very aware of compounding errors and try to do everything you can to keep them from building on one another. All right, the vast majority of issues on Katahdin happen on the way down. About 80% happen on the way down. Part of that's probably just the basic physics of gravity. Part of that is because people are tired and often dehydrated, often hungry, and starting to get a little shaky and low blood sugar. All those things tend to happen later in the day and more than they do at the beginning of the day. So the most common injuries on Katahdin: exhaustion, lower extremity injuries, that's leg bruises, bumps, sprains, breaks, somebody getting lost or separated from their party, dehydration, head injuries, and upper extremity injuries. That's the list in order of, so lower extremity injuries and exhaustion make up a majority of search and rescue incidents and injuries on Katahdin. So I want to give you a quick run through of search and rescue, just so you are kind of aware of the safety net that is there for hikers. There's the search part and then there's the rescue part. If you're on the trail, the search part is usually measured in hours. Not always, but usually measured in hours. If you have gotten off the trail, the search part is often measured in days. That is where extra food comes in and why it's good to have some extra resources at your disposal: the knife, the fire starting kit, the whistle in that situation. So staying on the trail will lead to a much quicker help getting to you much more quickly if you need it. Types of rescue. The most common thing that happens is an assisted walkout. That's when a ranger or another hiker even comes and finds you and helps you. maybe gives you a shoulder to lean on, helps you bandage up your ankle, and they help you walk out on your under your own power. That is the kind of the lowest option on the scale here. Next level up, if you're not able to be mobile on your own, is a litter carry, and that's when you get carried out on a stretcher by people. I have helped carry someone down the hunt trail in a litter who had really badly injured her knee. It is a long process involving usually 20, 30, 40 people to carry somebody safely down a trail, but it is an option. Helicopter. For really remote, really difficult rescues where it would be taking days to get somebody out via rescue litter, the Maine Forest Service and the Maine Army National Guard are very generous with their time and pilots and perform rescues on Katahdin when needed. Those can be a short haul rescue where they send a rescuer down attached to a rope. They help you out, clip you in to a harness, and you get a ride off the mountain hanging 100 feet below a helicopter. It's, especially if you're badly injured, it's not a great way to leave the mountain, but it's often the quickest way back for people who are hurt on the knife edge or places like that. Finally, a helicopter hoist rescue, slightly more complex and needs a little more personnel on the helicopter, but that's when you get someone comes down, helps you, clips you in, and you get lifted back up to the helicopter and fly out that way. So those rescues are uncommon. They're very rare. They are there if people really need them. So the great news is only a tiny fractions of a percent of hikers in the park ever need that kind of help. The vast majority of Katahdin hikes, general trips to the park go smoothly and go well. And everything that we just talked about during the whole presentation is designed to help you have a happy, fun, rewarding, safe trip in the park. And so if you do those steps, get yourself prepared ahead of time, it's an incredible, absolutely incredible mountain. So much fun, incredibly rewarding and fun place to hike. Even if you choose to go an easier route than the way where this hiker is that you're looking at on screen, whether you pick the saddle, A-ball, or one of the tougher routes like the knife edge, there is really a trail option there for everybody, and just an incredibly fun and rewarding place to hike. So I have gone way longer than intended. Thank you for being patient with me. I am going to shift gears now to questions, of which there are many I can see in the chat. And what I'm going to do is ask Jam, if you're listening, if you don't mind hopping on screen. Jam is going to look through the Q&A and the chat and choose some questions to bounce my way, and we'll work through the list of questions if that works for you, Jam.
Yeah, definitely. Tons of questions, like you said. So if we don't get to them today, keep an eye out. There'll be some follow-up from us where we're going to try and get to the questions that we can't answer live, just so everyone knows.
Good.
Let's start with gear. Aaron, what size pack would you recommend?
Yeah, great question. The pack that I showed you is a 28 liter Patagonia pack. That's this day pack here. That is about the smallest that I would recommend for a Katahdin day hike. All the stuff that I showed you just barely fit in there, and it was really quite full. The gear that I showed you and that I pulled out was 16 pounds in this pack. But anyway, this is what I climbed Katahdin with. If you're hiking in a worse, early or late in the season, and you're going to be carrying a little bit of the more warm weather stuff, warm stuff for colder weather conditions, I have this larger pack. This is a 45 liter that compresses down to about 30, 35 pretty easily. This is what I take if I'm leading a group of people, and I'm wanting to bring like backup gear for them, and or if I'm hiking in spring and fall, I use a 45 liter shrunk down. So I do know people who climb with smaller packs. I don't know how they do it. So I'd recommend, 28, 30 maybe is the minimum.
Awesome. We have another question about whether or not there are packs available in the park to summit Katahdin instead of having to take your bigger pack.
That's a great question. And I am not entirely confident in the answer. So for years, there have been for AT through hikers who, especially who have been coming up the trail with a giant backpacking pack. The park had a collection of day packs at Katahdin Stream that through hikers could borrow to climb. That was only a Katahdin Stream thing. I'm not aware of there being packs or gear at any of the other ranger stations. And honestly, the last time I saw them, they were getting pretty rough, and I'm not sure if they're still in use. But for decades or for a very long time, yeah, the park did have packs there for through hikers.
Great, thank you. A question about campsites. If to confirm, if you're camping in the park the night before, if you decide to hike up from Roaring Brook, do you or do you not need a parking pass for the next morning?
If you are camping the night before, you do not need a parking pass. Yep. And you only, but if you're camping, if you want to climb Katahdin on Saturday and you have a camping reservation for Saturday night, you do need a parking pass. So it only works that you don't need a parking pass if you're camping the night before you climb, if that makes sense. But if it's the night after, um, only the night after, then you do still need a parking pass.
Great. In your experience, Aaron, what weeks have the fewest hikers?
What routes have the fewest?
What weeks?
Oh, weeks. Unfortunately, it's really either bug season or bad weather, I would say. Early season when it's really, really buggy and the conditions are just iffy in May and early June. Slightly lower numbers of hikers, definitely peak numbers in July and August, and right on through. I mean, it starts to taper off a little bit into October, but Indigenous Peoples Day weekend, there's the mountain's still very busy, even into October on the weekends. I would say midweek, even in the summer, even in the peak of summer, if you have the flexibility to climb on a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, it's often way, way quieter. It's really not so much about the week of the summer as it is the day of the week that affects how many people you'll see.
Another question about hiking. Given the leave no trace principles in the park, where do you go to the bathroom when hiking Katahdin?
Great question. So this is so if you've taken a leave no trace class, there's a little bit different information that you'll get in different parks about this. So the above tree line, basically you below tree line, you need to be 200 feet from a trail or a water source to go to the bathroom off the trail. And the park, you should go off the trail a couple hundred feet. Incidentally, this is when many people get lost, so don't let that happen to you. Orient yourself before you set off into the woods to go to the bathroom. Dig a cat hole and bury your waist in the woods. And the park does ask that you carry out, if you're able to carry out your toilet paper as part of leave no trace and carry out in the park. Above tree line, really do your best, try to not end up in that situation and stop at the outhouses at the ranger stations or at Chimney Pond on your way up. But if you're really stuck, there's a horrible name for this that you may have heard people joking about. You've heard of white blazes and blue blazes. The park refers to people pooping on the trail as brown blazing. It does happen, and it is possibly the worst hiking form. People do it, and it's just awful. So go off the trail and rock hop off the trail and do the best you can a couple hundred feet away from the trail. And carry out your toilet paper, but hopefully do your best not to end up in that situation. But emergencies happen, but yeah, carry in, carry out with all paper products and 200 feet from a trail or water source.
Great, thank you. I think you answered this in your presentation, but I'm just going to ask it again. If someone is planning on hiking in June but doesn't have insulated pants, is that a date when they could really regret it, or is it close enough to hot weather where the stakes are low?
It is a day when you could really regret it. Some of you may remember what the tragedy that happened on Katahdin last June. That was the first few days of June, last couple days of May, first few days of June, and hypothermia weather is really very much like what it was today. Low 40s and pouring rain is hypothermia weather, and that is very much early June weather in Maine. Many days like that up on Katahdin. So yeah, it's worth, even if you don't have insulated pants like the ones I showed you, a pair of Polypro underneath a pair of wind pants would probably qualify in that situation. Or like running tights under a pair of wind pants would be fine for June.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Aaron, do you know if there is an available Katahdin specific forecast like the one for Mount Washington?
There is, yep. And it is difficult to find on the National Weather Service website, but it's called the Katahdin, they're called recreation forecasts. And there's ones for the top of Cadillac, Katahdin Woods and Waters National Monument. There are a few from around the state for popular recreation areas. Really hard to find, so we put a link to it on our website. So if you go to friendsofbaxter.org and click through to the part about current conditions in the park, we have a link to that Katahdin Summit forecast right there.
Great. A question about one of your routes. Would you be able to assign a difficulty grade to a route where you went up Hunt and down Abbott? Hard, very hard, so on and so forth.
Yeah, definitely the middle, probably the middle of the difficulty spectrum, creeping up toward the upper end of the spectrum. Hunt Trail is, it's more challenging than it would seem at first glance. And going down, A-Ball has its own challenges, even now that the trail's off the slide. So yeah, I'd say very, very hard. And then you have to get back to your car 2 miles on the road. And if you go A-Ball to Hunt, the traffic at the end of the day is going in the right direction for you to catch a ride out. If you go Hunt to A-Ball, you'll be going against the flow of traffic, and car after car will drive by you, and you'll have to walk the whole 2 miles on the road without anybody being able to pick you up. So the other way's better.
Awesome. I just had another question. Oh, does the park offer any group climbs if you don't have anyone else to hike with?
The park does not, but the park does have a really wide range of interpretive programs. It does have people called summit stewards who are up on Katahdin as volunteers who can answer questions. But in terms of actual group hikes, no, the best option is to hire a local guide. There are several sort of mid-sized companies around Maine who offer guided group trips up Katahdin. They're on the pricier side, but for your first experience, it's a great way to go with a group of people and have an experienced guide there to kind of show you the ropes and have a fun group to go with. So I see those scheduled every season. There are always groups like that being put together. Hiring a guide yourself with a few friends is a great option, or friends. In the past, pre-COVID, we did offer some group hikes in the park. It's something that I would love to do again, and if we do, we'll be sure to let you know. But yeah, I think those are the best options that I know of.
Where would you recommend people camp before hiking up?
The best would be, if you have a trail that you really want to hike, the best thing would be to camp at the bottom of that trail. So if you want to hike A-Ball, camp right at A-Ball. If you want to hike Hunt Trail, camp right at Katahdin Stream. If you want to do any of the trails on the other side of the mountain, camp at Roaring Brook would be your best bet. That way you can roll out of your sleeping bag. My favorite way to do it is to get the night before and the night after your climb, if you're able to. That way you can be there, get up whatever time you want to, do your hike, come back down when you're all tired. You don't have to do the however many hour drive home. It's really nice just to be able to kick back and already be kind of where you need to be after a hike. So that to me is the best. People have their favorite spots. There are people who climb Katahdin, out from camping at other Daisy or Kidney or Nassaudnahunk or other places in the park. There's a lot more driving involved. not ideal. I would really do your best to be at one of those trailheads.
Great. And then this should probably be our final question, but do you have any other insights on registering for a campsite, organizing a hike, or how a person picking a hiker up could get into the park?
Say the last part again, taking a,
How a person picking a hiker up could get into the
oh,
park.
picking a hiker up. Yeah, so really the best, if you have some more detailed questions, and if you're picking up an AT through hiker, I would really recommend reaching out to the folks at the AT Lodge in Millinocket. There are some folks who specialize in helping AT hikers wrap up their hikes and making that go smoothly. Really wonderful folks who do this all the time and have great advice. I would reach out to them if it is an AT specific situation that you have. In terms of generally picking up a hiker who, under more general circumstances, I really think what you might need in your situation is to, look at some maps, figure out where the roads are, figure out where the trailheads are, where your hiker is going to be. There's a really good guidebook, which I have an earlier edition of here. This is called everyone calls it the Clark Guide because a guy named Stephen Clark wrote it and did an amazing job years ago. The park now owns the publishing rights to this. This is full of information. So if you need some general overview information about the park, you're going to be headed in to meet somebody, or to you want to know about campgrounds and what they're like and just hear more of that stuff. The current edition of this, I think it's the 8th edition, is well worth picking up, and you can get that directly from the park. Get a map, ask around, stop and talk to the wonderful folks at the visitor center. The park has a lovely visitor center at Toad Pond. The staff there are so kind and so helpful and so knowledgeable. Just pull in there on your way in. They'll get you on the right track. Great questions. Oops, I'm not hearing you, Jam. I think you got muted.
Like I mentioned before, if we didn't get to your questions, we'll be sending a follow-up email and covering some of the most frequently asked ones. So don't fret.
Sounds good. Thank you. So yeah, I can see there are still some there. I'm happy to, I'll take a look through the list of questions after we wrap up the session. We often send out a follow-up, and I'd be happy to do my best at answering some of those, depending on how detailed they are. If there's really a lot of questions, I'd also be happy to do another session like this just as a simple Q&A about Katahdin sometime. So if you have a lot of questions that you didn't get answered yet, I'd be really happy to do that sometime for anyone who's interested. But thanks, Jam, for sending questions my way. Really appreciate it. Thank you all so much for attending. Really appreciate you being here. I hope it was valuable. And I do want to say, if you're interested in climbing Katahdin, if you want to learn more, if you want to kind of be more in the loop about these sorts of things going forward, joining Friends of Baxter is a great way to do that. We love keeping in touch with our members. Our newsletters have helpful information like what I just shared in the newsletters, that we're sharing on a regular basis. You'll be in the loop with our email communications, and we try to be as helpful as we can for our members in terms of these types of workshops and events. So there really is, it's a great way to give back to the park and contribute, but also a great way to learn and just kind of be connected to the place yourself. So I hope you'll consider joining if you're interested. Otherwise, thank you all so much for coming. Really appreciate it. Sorry we went so far over time, but there was a lot of fun stuff to cover. And hope you all have a wonderful rest of your evening. And if you know of someone who would like to see the recording, we did record the session, and it should be posted on our website and YouTube channel within a week or so. We should have it up and posted. So again, thank you all so much, and good night.